Hello, everyone. I am Corey Andrew Powell, and I'm joined today by Aaron Golub, and he became the first legally blind athlete to play football in a Division One game when he was at Tulane University. Now, today he is a motivational speaker who can teach us all a thing or two about not letting other people and have their assessments define who we are, as opposed to us reaching our actual potential and full capabilities. Aaron, welcome to Motivational Mondays.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. I have to actually shout out one of my work colleagues, Peter Orozco, who sent me an email about you a few weeks back. He was like, "Corey, oh my gosh, you got to hear this guy's story. It's so great." And so I definitely, when I read about you, I thought you were so aligned with who we are as an organization. So to begin with, I would love to ask you, though, if I may, is your condition something that happened later in life, or was it something you were born
I was
with?
born with it.
Okay. And so basically it's really one of those things that, people don't understand sometimes. There's different degrees as well of impairment or blindness. So you have blindness in one eye and then you have an impairment in the other,
Correct.
correct?
My right eye is completely blind and my left eye is very limited vision. Yep.
Okay, okay. And what's fascinating about that is, there's always a comparison between people who I guess are fully able-bodied accomplishing far less than people who have to deal with some of life's challenges. And I think you are one of those great examples. And so let's begin with you have this amazing rise working as an athlete, basically, or in a college athlete. But you seemed in the beginning, when I was looking at some interviews, you almost seemed to shy away from sort of telling your story and talking to the press a little bit. I think it's just because it's who you were. So talk about like why you think people were so interested in your story.
Yeah, I mean it was unique. Like you said, I was the first athlete who was legally blind. But in the beginning, and still today, my goal isn't to be the best disabled athlete or the best disabled speaker or best disabled entrepreneur. Like I wanted to be the number one long snapper in the nation, and I wanted to play at the highest level possible, and that's what my focus was. I didn't care what my vision was, what others was. No one was going to give it to me easy. I would hit just as hard as everyone in practice and games. I would lift just as much as everyone in the weight room. I'd run just as much as everyone on the field. Like my focus was on being a top tier Division 1 athlete, not being this legally blind athlete.
And for the record, I mean, just people who don't know you, I mean, physically, you're like what, 6'2", and like 100, like not just like 200 pounds, or you were like kind of a big guy.
My pro day numbers, I was like 6'2", like 217 when I
Yeah.
was at my biggest for NFL.
I think that very often people mean well, maybe when they're putting limitations on us. I think they're concerned. But I know you had an interest in football. I think, I guess, from what I was reading, probably earlier, but by seventh grade, you had a real serious passion for football. And I think your parents and your coach, right? They're monumental in how you decided it was possible. So tell me a little bit about the role that it played having other people sort of believing what you believed.
Whenever you have a goal or some sort of success in your life, no one gets there on their own. Everyone has people around them to support. And so my parents definitely played a crucial role when I was growing up, specifically, helping me get to where I need to go. But at the end of the day, I think in any goal, in any challenge, it's an internal choice to push through it and do the work and accomplish what you set out to. Yes, there are people there who supported me and helped me with coaches, with family members, with parents. But at the end of the day, it's are you willing to do it yourself? Because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think it's a universal story as well. When I hear you speak, and I've watched some of the podcasts you're on, and what I think is interesting is that your situation is, of course, your own, very specific, but it's definitive of the fact that we all have something, right? Everyone, maybe to a degree higher than others, maybe where there's more disadvantages or whatever might be the assessment. But what I get from you is a belief that we all are in the same boat when it comes to having to believe we are able to accomplish something and shutting out the outside voices.
I think a lot of people make decisions in life, whether it be when they're younger, their life decisions, their business decisions, whatever it may be, based on other people's judgments, thoughts, opinions, feelings. And that's what stops a lot of people from accomplishing what they want. They're afraid of what other people think. And because of that, they're not willing or able to go after their goals, go after their dreams, and have that true ambition. Instead, they should be focused on why do they want to do something because they want to do it and not worry about other people's judgments or opinions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I was saying earlier too. I think people probably mean well, but I guess when it comes to someone who they think may have an obstacle like some sort of physical condition, I think their intentions are they're protecting you if they're putting limitations on you. But I think that it's definitive of what in general we do. But I do wonder also because I know regularly people have self doubts as well. So we can often be our own biggest voice, our own loudest detractor. Actually, did you ever have those instances for you where you were like, okay, maybe this is crazy. I can't do this. Or were you always just like, no, I'm gonna rock this out. I'm a rock star.
When I started playing football in seventh grade, I wasn't good. I was did not very athletic, not very strong, not very fast, didn't play a ton. And then in 10th grade, sophomore year of high school, I found long snapping and I focused on that and did whatever I could to get to where I wanted to go. I think, in the beginning, the first few years before I found the position, it was hard, it was challenging. I'm sure I had self-doubt and uncertainty there. But then once I found long snapping, it wasn't necessarily that I knew 100% how things were going to work out, but I had the internal motivation that I wanted to do this for myself. And I think I had a confidence to a degree that I was going to put in the work that no one else was willing to do it because that I knew I was going to get results that no one else was able to get.
So much of your story aligns with the NSLS and so many of the values that we try to instill in our community. There's so many things going on in what you just said that are so aligned with us. For example, one is the fearlessness of like not stopping yourself from getting anywhere because you're afraid to take that first step. I mean, so many of us do that in so many aspects of our lives. And I think what you just said speaks to that first thing, like you just go for it and you just do it. But more importantly, the admission of like, hey, I wasn't that great at first, you know, and then you keep going and you keep working at it. And I think the tenacity part, is really that's a big part of it as well to keep going. Because I know that sometimes we're like our biggest, detractors in our own heads. Do you also get other athletes talking to you about their struggles with maybe trying to accomplish things and people putting limits on them?
Yeah, I've met a few, and it's always a an honor and a pleasure when I'm able to meet those athletes who have used my story as inspiration to help them meet their goals and accomplish what they want to do. And so I love when I'm able to do that. It's not every day, but it's definitely from time to time I meet those individuals.
And you've also mentioned too in other interviews how sort of like and you even said it in this beginning of our conversation, like football didn't necessarily or doesn't define you, right? That wasn't necessarily like all that you were, but it was just another thing you wanted to accomplish. But I know you were also a student as well. So what was your academic aspiration while you were going to school?
Yeah, I always did okay in school. I never did amazing. I studied finance, but I never loved school. It just wasn't for me. I did fine. I got decent grades. Um, but I wasn't a person who really enjoyed it or wanted to go through it. I learned a lot from being at Tulane and playing football, and that's where I have most of my kind of memories and I think life lessons from. But school just wasn't my favorite thing in the world by any means. And I went into finance after school as well as kind of building a speaking career to start, and it shifted from me leaving finance to launching other companies and becoming an entrepreneur, and that's what I do now, obviously. But I think there was a place for it, and obviously I took my academics seriously, but it wasn't something I never was a straight A student. I never loved everything about it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you were not alone in that capacity in any way. Going back to football, though, as you were evolving, just to take it back to when you were sort of in the seventh grade and you were doing your thing and trying to sort of get better at it, you do mention, of course, long snapping. And for those of us who don't really know what long snapping is in relation to football training, explain a little bit about why long snapping was so significant for you.
Yeah, so I was the person on punts and field goals who snapped the ball between my legs and blocked in front of me during punts and field goals. And I found that position in 10th grade. Before that, I was an offensive and defensive lineman, and I realized that if I got good enough at this unique niche position, I might have an opportunity to play at a very high level. And that's what I focused on from then on out. It was something that I practiced each and every day, both in the mornings, when I woke up early, and during practice after school. But I put everything I had into it to get to the level I was, because I knew that most people didn't want to be that position. And even people who, were going after it, they weren't going to put in the work that I was willing to do. And so I understood, and I had this idea that if I worked 10, 20, 30 times harder than everyone else, then I would have a shot.
And Division One, again, for those who don't really follow sports, Division One is like the highest level for college athletics, correct? Or
Yes.
football in this case.
Yep.
And then the next step would be like the NFL. And if I'm
Yep.
not mistaken, I read you had, was there a point where you were like a free agent for the
Yeah.
NFL?
So senior year, I didn't want everything to be done on football. I was training for my pro day, did my pro day, which is essentially a workout and tryout in front of a bunch of teams. Ended up, talking to a handful of teams for a bit. Was a free agent. Didn't end up making a roster, but gave a go at it, and that was my journey after college, and then kind of transitioned
Mhm.
into, like I said earlier, the world of finance, the world of speaking, and that led to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that's fascinating though. I mean, quite honestly, to get to that level, considering where you began in the seventh grade when people were like kind of not necessarily thinking that was even a possibility, there you are being an NFL free agent. That's phenomenal. That's
Thank you.
amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, man, that's amazing. Um, I know that you, as a motivational speaker, though, you have, I guess, varied audiences. So it's not just sort of individuals, I guess, or non-corporate audiences, but you do also talk to companies and organizations as well.
My main practice is with companies.
Okay.
So my company is my organization is broken down to a few different areas, and so it's speaking, workshops, and consulting. And so we work with
Hmm.
companies anywhere from small startups to Fortune 500s on speak one-time keynote speeches, workshops, a day-long workshop to good dive into different topics, and longer term consulting, whether it be on leadership development, overcoming adversity, diversity, inclusion, different topics like that. We also I speak at conferences all over, work with college and professional sports teams, schools, all types of organizations and teams.
Right. And you mentioned diversity and inclusion being one of the key things you talk about. Is it more so as companies are looking, I mean, do you find that companies are genuinely now looking to sort of be a lot more accommodating to all the various types of people in the world who may have not had representation in the past? Or do you find you're still like kind of really having to sort of lead them, to the water, so to
No,
speak?
I think there's a mix. I think it just depends on the level and size of the company. Obviously, if I'm going in and talking to or working with a Fortune 500, they have that built out at least to a pretty good degree. And so maybe in there, it's going in and talking about my experience, helping them expand on their initiatives, whatever that might be. Obviously, with a smaller company, it's going in and having a speech, but it also might be really helping them come up with the strategy and the framework for what they're going to do, because they probably don't have that built out yet. If you're a $10 million company, your focus is on business growth. Your focus probably isn't on D&I, and that's totally fine, totally understandable. That's where my focus right now on my business is growth. That's my
Hmm.
number one and only focus. But when you're at the $100 million range for a company, when you're at the $1 billion range, you're going to have that built out most of the time. And so it's a very different experience based on the size of the company I work with.
Right. And I think also to your point, I mean, there's all these varying degrees of what inclusion means. I know people speak about that and they think often when it has to do with race and ethnicity. And we forget about people who have different body challenges or different,
Yeah.
physical situations. And so you're right, there's very different sort of levels in which, a company might need to accommodate that. Now, when it comes to also the parallels between your own experiences and talking to these audiences, because I mean at the end of the day you have to be um, completely authentic, right? They're coming to you because you have something to say about um, diversity, obviously, and inclusion, because you're someone who had to navigate through the world as someone different, so to speak, in that
Yeah.
regard. um, but what are some of the parallels you find when you're talking to like a corporate audience? that you're bringing to it from your own personal experience that you're relaying to the corporate?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tie-ins between diversity and inclusion and overcoming adversity when I talk about those topics. And it's despite the circumstances you're in, how do you overcome them? How do you create a pathway for success? Going over the common misconceptions that people have about, people with different disabilities, or what they can and can't do, going through the, unconscious biases, what are the ways that companies can hire better, promote better, companies can work with those individuals better and create that culture better. And I think every organization has different challenges, different unique experiences. And so the first thing I always, look to do is have that conversation and sit down and figure out what is going on, what can you do better, where can we improve? Because whether it be a speech or a workshop or consulting, I want to tailor it towards that specific organization. Because I could give a talk. I talked to I had a conversation with someone at a school this morning, actually, who's going to be bringing me in to speak. And one of the things I said to him is like, I could give the same exact talk to you and a school town over, and it would probably impact and would add a lot of value. But if we take 30 minutes and we have a conversation and I learn about what's going on in your school, what the challenges are, where you want to go, what the issues are and the problems are, how you've tried to overcome them, what has worked, what hasn't worked, they're going to be different than every other school, I guarantee you. And so if I can use that information to tailor my talk, to tailor my speech, and really hit on those specific points, your faculty, your students, everyone will get a lot more out of it. And so it's always unique.
That's a great point because I speak to a lot of people on the show, and they're motivational speakers in some cases, but I find that the most successful ones literally said exactly what you said. There's not some like
Yeah.
cookie cutter seminar they're
And and
teaching,
and
right?
and like look, if I go speak at a conference and they hire me to come in and talk about my standard keynote, yes, that's
Hmm.
most of the time going to be a typical, you know what I mean? That
Prepared
that's a
and yeah.
prepared what I do. I can go do my most popular one is achieving goals through adversity, and I can
Hmm.
go in
Right.
and say that right now probably. It's, you know what I mean? I understand what I'm
Hmm.
going to do. But
Right.
I can also tailor that and make it unique when I talk to companies, schools, teams based on what's going on within them, because it's a different
Hmm.
type of environment.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, totally. I get it because, the diversity and inclusion conversation is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to, there's no difference in nuances there. But definitely, if you're going to, like you mentioned, go to a multi-million dollar company with a bigger budget and a bigger demographic and all these different things, you would have to tailor that. But I think at the end of the day, too, there's a very common denominator I find in successful people, which you also check that box. And I think it stems from when you were younger, when you fell in love with the sport of football. But I think in articles I've read about you, what comes across common as a common denominator is the word passion. There was a passion you had for sports in that regard, and it led you all the way to how far you got with the as being an NFL draft pick. So, where do you think, or not where do you think, but what drives your passion for success?
I think that's a word that I probably used to use a lot. And I think honestly is probably thrown around too much, because I think that there's a very big difference between passion and obsession. And so the way I like to talk about that is when you're passionate about something, it could be a hobby, it could be something that you put some time into and you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But truly successful people are not passionate, they're obsessed. I was obsessed with football to the point that people thought I was absolutely batshit. Like I would wake up at 5 a.m. every day, practice long snapping, go to school, go to practice, lift weights every single evening, go on the weekends, did whatever I could. Like people thought I was insane. I 100% believed when I wasn't great that I was going to be a Division 1 athlete. People thought I was nuts. I was absolutely obsessed, and that's how I am today within business and with everything I'm doing. But you have to be obsessed if you want to be successful. You can be passionate and see some success, but it's going to be limited unless you're willing to be obsessed.
Poignant words of wisdom to end with. Aaron Golub, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you being here today. And like I said, I think your story is remarkable. And I love the fact that for you, you're kind of like, no, it's just who I am in a way. I read some articles where you didn't like to do interviews about it, but it is quite fascinating. So we appreciate you being here today with us on Motivational Mondays.
Yeah, thank you for having me.